All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining TAM Lab 84 today. My name is Bill, and I'll be running this lab. This is the creation and customization of multi-cloud virtual machine images. It's a mouthful. So a couple administrative slides here. First off, if you are a TAM customer or you have TAM customers, we're looking for TAM customer ideas now for our TAM Lab sessions. So reach out to your TAM. Give your name and the session title and description, and let's go ahead and get some more customer ideas flowing in. Next up, hopefully this isn't a surprise for anybody. Adobe Flash is going end of life December 31st of this year, and so there are impacts to vCenter, Horizon, vCloud Director, NSX, and so if this is the case for your environment, make sure to reach out and work with your TAM, and hopefully we can help you get over that hump.
Hey, Bill, on that note, we also have a nano lab that addresses that. So you can check out our library of videos for that.
Oh, Jody, thank you so much. That's exactly it. So perfect. Check out the lab. We'll, for those on YouTube, we'll go ahead and link to that as well. All right, so this is me. I'm a senior TAM at VMware. I've been in IT for a while in different roles, support a bunch of different customers. I'm a team lead. I'm on the TAM Lab leadership team, vExpert. I speak at VMUGs. And I have a bunch of certifications and letters after my name. So that's me. All right, and so with this lab, what are we trying to accomplish? Like, why are we here? Why are you spending your time here? I want to look into, how can we create virtual images for multiple clouds, right? Each cloud is different and they have their own way of doing things. So how can we accomplish that? I also want to reduce the complexity of developing for multiple cloud environments. Again, each cloud is different and how you do things is different. So how can we make that a little easier? Also make sure that the images are created consistently, right? So they're predictable, right? We know what they should look like and what they're going to do for us. And then also kind of get some more exposure into just another component that plays into the whole concept of like infrastructure as code. Because that's pretty cool, pretty modern. And so we're going to leverage Packer. Anybody on the line here familiar with what Packer does? We'll find out if you don't know. So Packer is a utility from HashiCorp that actually lets you create these virtual machine images, but for multiple clouds. It's pretty sweet. I want to touch on a couple concepts before we hop in the lab. Let's see here. There we go. So there's the idea of a builder, right? This mechanic within Packer that actually builds a machine for a single platform, right? For a single cloud environment or compute environment. There's a concept of a provisioner, right? So this component actually installs and configures software within that machine that it just built. So they typically come after, the activities of a builder. And then lastly, there's this post processor, right? So after a machine is built and provisioned, you can do some stuff with it, right? You can export it or import it. You can do all kinds of things. And so examples of builders, right? Like, thinking about the platform, builders can provision to like EC2 and Azure, Google Cloud Hyper-V, and then you see a handful of like VMware ones at the bottom. And there's some subtle differences on why you would use one over the other. I won't go into too many details on that for this lab. And then provisioners. So like, how can you install software after it's been built? So you can see Ansible and Chef. We have Salt, which is great for VMware, right? And you can run some shell scripts and things of that nature. So it's all very relevant to a multi-cloud strategy and tools that many of us are comfortable with. And so the lab, right? Peek behind the curtains. This is what we're working with. I have my home lab here, and I'm going to be spending my time on this purple Packer machine here. I have a vCenter and some workloads running in there. I'm also using my tenant in AWS. So there's a VPC there that we're going to be leveraging as well as VMware Cloud on AWS. Now, as far as connectivity goes, Packer can reach AWS. Well, first off, Packer is on the LAN with Home Lab. It's open to everything. It can reach APIs and SSH for AWS, which is going to be great. I want to call out that the VMC instance that I have access to is a little bit of under construction. So I got a little early access to an environment. So I only have API only. I can't actually access the VM once I deploy it, which ended up actually being a pretty good thing for this lab. So with that, we're heading to the lab. So let me kill this. Perfect. And I will do this for my video. All right. Sweet. So here we are in the lab. Now, Packer is a super lightweight utility to install. So in my environment, I have a Linux server. It's Ubuntu. So I added the HashiCorp repository, software repository to it. And then it's just a matter of, running for me. It was apt-get install Packer. Super easy to do, really lightweight. Now, it relies on, I'm using the JSON file format. There's another format you can use as well, but you define what's going to go on using these JSON files. So in this instance, we're going to look at a handful of different kinds of deployments, and I'll kick them off, and then we'll kind of walk through what they look like. Let me go ahead and close this Windows one up first. So from the Linux perspective, I'm deploying Ubuntu virtual machines. And so to do that, to help with the customization, there's this concept of a pre-seed file. This is not unique to Packer. This is something you can do with, through Ubuntu. So we can define some things like, my username and my password, configuring the hard drives, right? Like all of this stuff, right? We're passing some parameters to it from here. And then if I look at the actual build, right? We talked about this thing called a builder. So you can see here, I'm specifying the type of vSphere ISO, which is meaningful. There's different VMware deployment options. Here's my vCenter information. Just like any good old home lab, I'm trusting in secure connections because, certificates are challenging sometimes. Specifying the environment that I'm going to deploy to. And then here's some information about the VM itself, right? It's going to have a name of this. It's going to have 2 vCPUs, 2 gigs of RAM. It's going to have a network card on a network, right? It's going to have a storage controller and a disk. It's going to attach that configuration file as a floppy, which is an interesting way to get information in. It's going to deploy this ISO, and there's different ways to specify ISOs. This one's a pretty cool way. It'll download it on demand. And then this is the fun thing. I just got the biggest kick out of this. You actually specify in this instance, you have the ability to anyway, but in this instance, you specify specific keyboard presses, right? You're going to enter these keys and perform a series of tasks where it's going to start typing on its own. It's a riot to see, but it makes perfect sense. You can see here at the end, we're going to convert it to template. And then if we get to the bottom, or when we get to the bottom, you can see this thing, a provisioner, right? So again, the concept of we're going to build something and then we're going to provision something. The provisioner here is of a type shell, so it's expecting SSH. And once this thing is deployed, it's going to go ahead and actually run a handful of commands, right? It's going to sleep, and then it's going to do an update, and then it's going to actually install some software, Ansible and Nginx. So let's kick that off, and then we can kind of watch what happens, because like I said, it's a riot. Let me hop over here. Perfect. Actually, there we go. Okay, so at the top, you can see we're running this command called Packer build. So it's going to build the thing. I'm passing a file of variables in. Actually, I think that's missing. Variables dot. There we go, JSON. And then a Linux, and then that JSON file that we just looked at. So let's go ahead and kick this off. And it's pretty verbose in what it'll tell you, which is nice. So it was looking for that ISO file. It already found it. It would shove it up into the data center or data store if it wasn't there, which is nice. Now you can see it's creating the VM. And if I hop over here and I look at this VM, this is where it gets fun. So I'm not doing anything. Like my hands are up here. But if you recall, see, it's typing on its own. It's using that keyboard input that we saw here. Let me pull this up. This boot command, and it's actually typing these things out, right? Now, that means that you can orchestrate all kinds of things with this, right? Maybe you want it to do something else. Fine, just tell it to go down a couple times and then something else. That's pretty unique. So we'll go ahead and let this thing go. And you'll see what's going on here. If we look at the right, back at this, this PuTTY window here, you get a sense of what it's doing, right? It looked for the ISO. It's like, all right, cool. I'm going to create the VM using that information I provided, like the cluster name and folders and whatever else, right? Mounted an ISO, created a floppy disk, you know, powered on the VM. Now it's waiting for it to boot. And that's what's going to happen here is the process understands that it should install and then reboot, and then it's going to wait. So it's just waiting for things to happen. So we'll be patient here. Has anybody used this before?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
No, but it looks awesome.
It looks really cool. How do you, the credentials for your vCenter, are those in the variables JSON file?
It is, yeah. In fact, that's a good question. Let me show you here. I'm going to drag this over just because we might want to see what's going on here. I have a cleaned version of this, but the other one actually has some passwords I don't really want to share, like AWS keys and stuff like that. But yeah, so you can see here it's a variable file that just calls out key value, right? And if I were to go look at that vSphere JSON file, there's a reference nomenclature here, right, where it's calling out bracket user. It's gonna be user variable, and then you actually open tick, right? So that's gonna be next to #1 on the keyboard. It's not a quote, and then you call out the variable name. Okay. So in my testing of this, I've gotten, I don't know, maybe 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes for this install to complete. Normally, what are you doing? You're deploying a Linux VM, or you're mounting some file systems and doing what else. It's a lot longer, a lot manual process, especially just for vSphere, and then you have to figure out how to do it for Amazon or anywhere else. So 4 minutes seems like a lot when you're on camera talking about it in a lab, but to realize a 4-minute build like this is pretty cool. So now you can see here it's waiting for the IP. The VM needs to report it back to the vSphere client, right? And it's going to grab that. The automation here is going to grab that IP, and we'll see it here in a second, where it identifies that IP, and then SSH is in. So here we go. Now I put a 30-second wait in because you never know what additional services might happen after SSH starts. So I thought, it might be good to have just a little wait in there. Probably could have cut down the provisioning time a little bit by reducing that, but yeah, such is life. So now a lot of the activity that we're going to see is going to happen here. So you can see that command of apt-get update, right? So it's updating. And now it's installing Nginx and Ansible. And so now we can see that's happening. Last thing it does is shut down the VM, which is nice. It cleans up after itself. So if this were to error out or you Control-C or something, it'll actually go through and delete the resources it created and kind of start from scratch or clean it up. So there you go. If I were to look over here now, I have a template that was created. Oh. And now I can deploy VMs with this using guest customizations or whatever else. So that's pretty cool, right? Hopefully. Next one I want to do is, this isn't just for Linux, it's for Windows, right? So let's take a look at Windows. So similar, function here, right? Where we had the idea of the pre-seed file that we could pass in and help configure, on deploy. We have that with Windows with the unattended .xml. We have some other commands to run here as well, a variable file, and then this. So this is our builder for Windows. So again, it's still of type vSphere ISO. It's the way we're interacting with vCenter. A lot of it is really the same. And where we get different here is in a couple places. Actually, I'll swing this over. Might help. There we go. Our floppy files now include 3 scripts. We have our 2 scripts at least. Our unattended XML, setting up WinRM so that we can actually remotely, do some things, and then also a command to set up VMware tools. We also specify in this instance a path to the installation ISO, as well as a path to VMware tools. So, and then lastly, we're specifying it's a Windows guest, and here's some credentials for WinRM, and we have a JSON variable file that provides most of the same information here. I could have probably come up with a naming convention and used a single variable file, but that's fine. Let me kick off this, and then I'll run through what it should be doing. So let's come back here. Perfect. And this is Windows. Okay. Now, one thing to call out, it says output will be in this color. That's actually meaningful for other use cases where things are being done in parallel, so it actually spits out multiple colors. All right, so we have this VM here now, TAM Lab template Windows. And you notice that we didn't actually pass any of those keyboard inputs that we did for the Linux side, because we're using the unattended XML file and things of that nature. And those are looked for by the installation process. So we don't have to do any of that stuff, but you noticed it just started doing its thing. If I look at the unattended, right, there's a lot of stuff going on in here, which is normal, right? There's some utilities from Microsoft that help you generate this, which is really good. Disable user account control, even just give it a name. The IE hardening, disabling that. Don't open server manager at logon. Just some annoying little things. Creating some user accounts. First logon. What are you going to do at first logon? Setting the execution policies for like PowerShell, things like that. Turning off the firewall, and then hiding the EULA. All of these things that are kind of obnoxious to do. Let's just go ahead and knock some of these things out. So that's what this looks like. Now we also have a command in here that will set up VMware tools. It's pretty straightforward. We remember if we look over here, we specified an ISO, 2 ISOs, right? They're going to show up on different virtual CD drives. And so we're going to go ahead and leverage one of those ISOs, right? The one for VMware tools, and then do a quiet setup. So we'll go ahead and that will happen. We'll see that here in a minute. And then the last one here is just setting up WinRM, right? So that's going to give us remote access to it. And then it'll clean it up when it's done. So that's where we are. Let's see here. How many people here create custom installations for either your environment or your customers? Like, nobody really ever uses the stock ISO, right?
Just to create the template and then go from the template.
Yeah.
Bill, so in the 2 examples you've shown,
yeah,
have you provided the location for like the folder, resource pool, or cluster host?
Yeah, let me show you.
Network.
Yep. So let's bring that up. So in this instance, the Windows one we're deploying, so we can kind of keep seeing what's happening on the side here. You can see here that I'm deploying to a cluster called cluster, and that's defined in the variables. A data store, for me, I probably should put this in the variable, and that was just a oversight on my part, but my vCAN data store.
Yeah.
And then a specific folder. And if we look over here, we can see that it's in a TAM lab folder in my data store. You can also specify resource pools or other specific host if you want instead of a cluster, things of that nature. From a network adapter, you can see that it's connected to a network I have called 86 virtual machines on a VMX-Net 3. And then it's a 30 gig hard drive, thin provisioned. So is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And then again, for consistency, we'll look at variables and just see how those things all kind of fit in. So there we go. Hey, if you ever make it to my home lab, you know how to log in. All right, so that's cruising. Let's just let that finish. Let's also that. Okay, perfect. So you can see that auto logged in as me, and that was part of the unattended windows. And now you can see it's actually installing VMware tools. So we'll probably see a little pop up here. There we go. So there's the WinRM. Okay, so now we know this works because in my troubleshooting this, I didn't specify the path to VMware tools correctly. And then it deployed itself, but it couldn't find anything on the network. So now that we see this here, it implies, VMX-Net 3 drivers there, right? VMware tools installed correctly. So now what it's gonna do here is, again, like we saw before, it's gonna wait for that IP address to be available in vCenter. And then it's gonna go ahead and act on it. In this instance, it's using WinRM to connect. It's gonna do a couple things and then actually shut itself down. So let's let that finish. It shouldn't take too much longer. There we go. And shut down. So once it's done, then we'll see, again, converting to template, cleaning everything up, right? Like removing that floppy drive. Like there's subtle little things about this process that sometimes we would forget about. So at this point, it took 6 minutes. And now if I go over here, that same object now has the little template icon. So, hey, now we made a Windows template. We could deploy it. We can use our guest customizations, but it already has some stuff out of the box. That's pretty cool. Next one I want to do is this is pretty fun. Clear. So I have access so kindly to a VMware Cloud on AWS tenant that we have within the TAM org. And so, like I said earlier, it's a work in progress. But what it actually enabled me to do is some subtle different use case around how do we implement for different use cases. So let me start this process. I'm going to deploy that Linux VM out here as well. So give me 1 second here. Packer build. Whoops. This is Linux VMC. So generally speaking, right, we know that a VMware or VMC on AWS SDDC is essentially the same as an on-prem, right, with some little differences in security permissions, things like that. But it's vSphere. It's using the same APIs, right? So there's no reason we can't deploy this to another cloud. That cloud happens to be VMware Cloud on AWS. Now I want to call out a couple different things here, though. All I have is essentially API and whoops. vSphere client access. So I can't like SSH to this thing. And that's an important part of the build process, right? Or sorry, the provisioning process, right? We saw this earlier with Linux where it would SSH in and it would run the update command and then install a couple packages. Because I don't have VPN, access to that network from my home lab, that wasn't really an option. So I had to come up with like, how do I install this software that I want to install on a machine where I can't necessarily get to it? So let me show you what that looked like, because there's multiple ways to skin the cat here. In this instance, let's look at VMC. You can see it looks very similar, right? We're still doing, here's our 2 CPUs and the boot command and all of this stuff, right? It all looks very much the same. But at the bottom, I don't have a provisioner, right? I don't have that mechanic because I can't remotely get to it. So instead, what I have here is a pre-seed file. Let's see here, SU doers, here we go. In the pre-seed file, you specify some packages that you want to install. And in this instance, I actually said, you know what, I'm just going to have it install here. So rather than using SSH to get in and then install the applications that way, I'm doing it as part of the pre-seed file. So there's multiple ways to address it depending on the use cases that you have. And so while I was kind of dejected at first, like, oh man, this isn't going to work, reality is there's just other ways to approach it. So you might have to get creative every now and then, but I think the tooling here kind of allows for that. Now, back to the question on resource pools. The way our TAM, VMC tenant is set up is we deploy to resource pools, right? And I think that's actually the case for just VMC in general. And so it has to be specified. And unless you specify it, the resource pool itself, it wants to deploy to the root, right? The default resource pool that every vSphere environment has. That's not going to fly. So I had to do this. I'll show you what that looks like. Actually, it's in the clean variables. So let's take, I think we're fine here. If I look over here at my resource pool, you can see it's compute resource, TAM users, and then me. Compute resource pool, TAM users, and me. It's pretty straightforward. But that's all it took to do that. And then I also have access to a specific folder. Workloads, TAM users, and then my name specifically. So that's where our security permissions are all built off of that kind of structure. Let me do it though, right? With the right permissions and understanding the environment, I'm able to do it. I don't know if you can catch it here, but it's talking about configuring Nginx, right? It's talking about some Ansible as well. So we know that command, right? Like install these packages is working. The other thing to call out here is the automation for kind of managing the environment, like managing the build process. When it can't remotely get to it, Packer has no idea what's going on, right? It's just waiting for APIs and looking for states of the VMs and the work that's going on. So you can see here, please shut down virtual machine within 30 minutes. That's a configurable setting. It was at like 15 or 5. It was at 5, and then that started being a problem. What it's listening for is the shutdown of the VM. So it's going to assume it takes some manual intervention here, right? I'm going to have to log in and actually shut down the VM. And then it's going to see, oh, the VM is shut down. I'm going to finish my actions. Okay. So this is where now I do my manual intervention. And since I'm here real quick, which Ansible? I found Ansible, right? There we go. So we can see that the web server is running. And then there's also some configurations in there around, SUDO, right? So privilege escalation. So let's real quick check that out just to make sure that got all set up. So in here, I should, I'm going to touch a file, something. Oops. There we go. I can't do that, but so I was not prompted for credentials, which my configuration specified. My username, though, can act as root, right? So these are all really, really good things here. So you just clean it up because this is an image and I don't want these little relics around. And I'm going to shut down the VM. Okay, there we go. So even with my monkeying around there, carving off another minute or so, it only took 6 minutes to deploy that from into the VMC tenant, which was fantastic. Couple more things I want to touch on, more examples. This one is kind of cool. So this is my my personal Amazon tenant here. Let me just refresh, make sure. Cool. Okay. This one, let's kick it off, and then I'll show you what it's doing. Okay, so you can see here it's looking at the AMI to make sure it can use it. Right, that name. It's creating some temporary key pairs and security groups. So if you're hip to AWS, that's very meaningful. It's allowing access to port 22, right? So I don't have to go in and configure that with the security group policy or anything like that. It's launching an instance. So we can see that. I'm going to go ahead and refresh. You can see, hey, here's Packer Builder doing a thing. Now it's waiting for it to become ready. And if we look at the code that we're executing here, we're using the same variables, right, in the variables.json. But you can see here it's actually VMC. Sorry, I loaded the wrong one. Here's AWS. We're specifying the builder of type EBS, right? The access key. So API, best practices, if you will, for letting some of these processes run. Which region, what's my VPC, what's my subnet. It's actually doing a AMI search for the image, right? So I want Ubuntu matching this flag. I want the most recent version of it, just in case there's been updates. It's using a T2 micro instance. And then this is how we're going to SSH in. And then when it's done, it's going to go ahead and create an AMI out of it. But the interesting part here is it's running the same provisioner that we did for our Ubuntu Linux. So we're installing, we're doing an update and then installing Ansible with Nginx with the same commands. So if we look over here, you can see it's already doing its thing. And I'll scroll up. Yeah, I should have buffer. I'll scroll up when this is done and we can look at a couple of the things that happened at the top. Actually, we can look at it when it's doing the AMI. Has anybody here done anything with Amazon VM images? Is this whole idea of creating your own custom AMI something you're comfortable with, or is it pretty foreign? Crickets. I know for me, it was semi-foreign. I got the idea, the concept of what how it should work, but actually making it work, it just felt like a bear. So where we're at here is the instance is stopped, and now it's creating that template, that AMI. This takes not too long, but enough that I should be able to scroll up. And now we can see here, let's look at some of the stuff that's done. It deployed the instance, which we saw. It opened up port 22 from anywhere. It logged in, right? So we see that with SSH. It's connected to SSH and it's provisioned, or it started the provision process. Again, provision process being these things down here. So we see that happening here with the update, right? And then we see we're installing Ansible. Let's see, where is that? Oh yeah, I just threw it in there. So you can see all of the update process that it went through, right? We're gonna go ahead and pull, update and then pull all these packages, get them all set up. It stopped it, now it's converting it to template. So let's just let that finish here real quick. Now, when you think about our customers and some of their backup strategies, for example, right? Replicating some data to AWS. Let's say there was a DR issue. They'd have to figure out how do you deploy an instance, right, of EC2, like a VM, or else deploy into VMC. Creating those images that are consistent with on-prem is hard, right? It's a different process. Your goals might be the same, but how do you do it? When you're using an ISO with unattended XML or pre-seed, it's different when you do it on AWS, and it's different when you do it on Azure. So a tool like this definitely helps. We can see that process took 4 minutes. What I want to do real quick is I'll do a quick deploy. So give me 1 second here. Launch. So we'll spend a little bit of my money. I think I'm past free tier. So that's all fine. That's all fine. I'll just pick something in US West 2A. I think we're fine there. Tiny little thing. Doesn't really matter. I'm not going to even do tags. And then I'll allow myself, actually, it's SSH inbound. There we go. Select that policy. And we're going to launch it. Okay. So launching the instances is significantly quicker than creating the AMI. So we can see here it's in a pending state. So let's let this finish, and then I'll connect with Putty, and we can just validate that it worked. Okay, there we go. So if I look at the instance ID, I can go ahead and get the IP address that was assigned, right? It's going to be an elastic IP. So let's go ahead and copy that. I'll throw that over into Putty that I've set it up with a key already. So let's see if SSH is open. Hey, there we go. So it knows, that specific instance likes to have the username of Ubuntu be the one you're logging in with initially. So I left it with that. It used the key that we specified during deploy, which is great. You do that for any AMI that you deploy in your environment here. Except now we have Ansible in here, right? And Nginx, right? So we took our specification, we said, deploy it out there, install these things. All I did was change the builder, right? I said, your EC2, do this, right? This is how you access and build a machine. Your vSphere, do this, right? But the commands that were run were the same, and it ends up with a predictable virtual machine. The last thing I want to run here is pretty darn cool. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my instances here, and I need to do a tiny bit of cleanup, so just bear with me for a second. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because we're going to redo it. Okay. So let's go back actually here. I'm going to deploy a multi-cloud, right? Let's do it all at once. So Packer. And this is Linux multi-cloud. Oh, sorry, I forgot the dash. Okay, look, EBS is green, vSphere is blue. If you're colorblind, I'm sorry. But you can see these are happening in parallel, right? What's going on right now, if I look here, is that VM is doing that goofy, keyboard press automation that it's doing right now. right? And if I look over here, we have a new AMI running, right? It's doing these things in parallel. And if we take a look at the code itself, this is pretty sweet. I have a builder here that's called EBS. I just copied and pasted from this other AWS one, right? Same things. In the same specification here, I also have a vSphere ISO builder. So now I'm specifying, when I run this thing, I want to use 2 builders. If I scroll down, you can see, as basic as it is, it's running the same commands on those instances. So it's going out saying, cloud, you do your thing, you cloud, you do your thing, and I want you to run the same commands. So then this ends up being a race. I don't know who wants to put money down on which one do you think will finish first, my home lab or the public cloud? Any takers?
These days, I don't know. That's a risky bet.
Yeah, I didn't now. Yeah. So let's let this thing go and then we'll see. So again, green is EBS, right, with Amazon. And so it's already started doing its updates. We can see in the back here on my home lab, it's still going through the install process because it's using an ISO versus something that's already been customized. The time difference isn't, in my testing, isn't as dramatic as you might think it would be. They both have the areas where they're quicker and slower. But at the end of the day, think about our customer admins or your home lab. The ability to create an image like this and just, hit go and then walk away, come back after you get some coffee and it's already deployed to multiple clouds. That's pretty cool. One thing since we have a second and these things are just kind of racing along, if I look at my multi-cloud again, you can see I'm using I use the same variable file. And that's where having this variable file with a different naming convention like VMC server or AWS, right, allows me to use the same file for multiple things. Okay, so now where we are here is the slower part of the AWS side where it's creating the AMI, right? Converting to template, if you will. And we've seen on the vSphere side, that's pretty quick. And I think we know that from experience, right? Like just right-clicking a machine and saying convert to template is a pretty quick process. So while AWS was a little quicker to actually throw down the actual bits, if you will, the conversion to template process is much quicker on the vSphere side. All right. All right, now we see the vSphere side, the blue text is caught up. It sees the IP address available. And now it's doing the obnoxious 30-second sleep that I probably should have changed to something else. So I know we've covered a lot and we're still waiting for this to finish. Is this logical for anybody? Does this make sense, like what we're trying to accomplish and how we're doing it?
It is. It's very cool, Bill.
Good. Okay.
Yes, it does.
Definitely cool.
Good, good, good. Hate to go through all of this and then find out, it doesn't make any sense.
You're just running this locally on your Windows machine there, the Packer build?
You can run it in Windows. I just have a VM that I run it from.
Okay.
Oh, this might be the first for me. vSphere finished first in 4 minutes and 50 seconds. So if I were to come over here.
Bill, we had a question. Is Packer free?
Packer is free. You just got to figure out how to learn it. It's an investment in your time. And there's a ton of really good documentation out there too, by the way. Our little shout out to our former colleague, Cody De Arkland. He has some really great content out there too. So if you're looking, is it Humble Lab, I believe is his blog? Check it out. There's some really good stuff there too.
Question, Bill.
Yes.
Will you be able to modify a deployed machine with the same
No.
files? This is not like Terraform.
It's not like Terraform. No. Yeah.
Okay. So it's just deployed and then that's it.
Yep. That's it.
Still time saving. Yeah.
So there you go. So it finished overall, deployed two images multi-cloud, right, in 5 minutes and 58 seconds. So under 6 minutes to get that pushed out and everything else. So that's pretty sweet, right? And hopefully as our customers and even us, right, as we have our home labs or whatever else we might do, right, we can support everybody moving to a multi-cloud, right? This is just one piece of the learning curve for how do you support multi-cloud in your environments. There's a million other things to consider as well, but this hopefully takes, a tool like this and a technique like this takes a lot of the stress off. So that's it. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I've put a link in the chat screen for everyone for Cody's blog. There's some recent 2020 content around Packer that they may be interested in.
One of the hardest things that I ended up, grinding through a little bit was that keyboard emulation, right? The key presses that you do during the boot options. Cody's blog was amazing resource there. So, feel free to, if you're going to go down this path, feel free to check it out, right? Try and do it yourself, but don't hesitate to look at other resources, because at the end of the day, when you're trying to record how many times you hit left or how many times you hit backspace and then you screwed it up, like it's a bit of a grind. So give it a shot, but don't be afraid to leverage other people's work that they've so graciously shared. But yeah, other than that, that's all I got. I appreciate everybody joining today. I'll go ahead and stop. You guys have a fantastic rest of your day and week, and then see you at the next TAM Lab.